Hello everyone, welcome back. Get comfortable, relax, and enjoy today's exciting fanfic. Now, let's begin part 1. Naruto was trudging out of the hospital, having finally been released after the failed attempt to retrieve Sasuke. The general civilian and shinobi populace, if possible, was treating him worse than ever. As if they knew, which they probably do, thought Naruto, what had just transpired in the hospital as he was being discharged. Flashback technique. As he was getting changed into his regular clothes in the changing room, Naruto heard the sound of Tsunade arguing with what sounded like an old man and woman. Curious as to what was being said, Naruto hurried to finish, mentally reminding himself to thank Shizune for grabbing him a clean, untorn jumpsuit from his apartment. I'd hate to have to walk around in that bloody and torn one Kakashi brought me here in. Even the hospital gown would be more comfortable than that. Closing up his jacket, he leaned his ear against the door to better eavesdrop on the conversation. How could the council do this without my approval? They didn't even give it to me to veto before putting it to petition for the populace, and there was no week-long wait to give everyone the chance to vote. They can't do this. Tsunade spoke with heated restraint. Strange. When Ba-chan is angry, she usually either yells it for the world to hear or talks in that, so cold hell would freeze from the chill, voice. She must really not want any random person to hear whatever they're talking about. He didn't realize that Tsunade might not want him to hear the conversation, either. We're sorry, Tsunade-sama, but while Naruto and Jiraiya went out to get you to become Hokage, Danzo managed to get some small laws passed to give the council more power. In the absence of a Hokage, there was no one to veto those laws before they could pass. This is the result of one of those laws passing. We came to tell you so you could break the news to him more gently, before the council calls him in to tell him to his face or sends a messenger to inform him by simply throwing him out of the village gates, came the voice of an old woman Naruto had heard before, but couldn't quite put a name to. She sounds like that old lady that I sometimes saw with Ojijizan. Wait, throwing him out of the village gates. Someone's getting banished by the council without Ba-chan's approval. I've got a bad feeling I know the unlucky guy. Naruto's expression saddened. He wasn't an idiot about how the vast majority of Konoha's ruling council loathed the very air he breathed. Naruto quickly stepped out calmly, drawing their eyes to him. Tsunade practically burst into tears at the look of defeated acceptance Naruto pointed at her. Homura and Koharu also visibly became more distressed at the sight of a defeated Naruto, though not to the point of tears. Seeing this, Naruto knew it was as he suspected, he was the one being banished. Why now? Not even Naruto recognized his own voice for a moment. The failure of the mission, one of the new laws allowed the council to decide the punishment given to individual shinobi for failing a mission. If they first get the approval of more than half the village civilians and shinobi, they could do so without consulting the Hokage, but only if the punishment were banishment or community service. Those who feel you are the contained rather than the container claim you let the Uchiha go to weaken the village. Danzo informed those who were neutral about the topic that you used a sizable amount of the Kyuubi's chakra during your fight with the Uchiha, claiming that the seal must be weakening and that it was only a matter of time until the Kyuubi could either corrupt or control you. There are still a good number of us who consider you as the Yondaime wished and trust in the Shinigami's seal to hold, but apparently there isn't enough of us to stop this, certainly not enough of us on the council, the old man spoke, sounding worn down. Flashback technique. Kai. After that, they had told him why, other than for emotional support, they had chosen to come and tell him before the council could do it. Once the council officially informed him of his banishment, he would have an hour to leave the village. Doing it this way, he had time to seal up or pack his belongings and prepare himself for a long trip, so that he could use the hour after the council informed him to let his friends know he was leaving the village. After he escaped Tsunade's embrace of death, Koharu had handed him a dozen empty storage scrolls to use in his packing and 2 in-use storage scrolls. Koharu explained that one of the scrolls was some stuff to help him get by on his own at first, while he said the other one had a time lock seal on it that he would be able to break after he was 16 and was from the Yondaime. The 2 elders then left, saying they would delay the council calling him to give him more time to take care of what matters. Naruto managed to pack most of his stuff while on autopilot. What will I do? Where will I go? What if they send Hunter Nin after me once I'm outside the village walls? Crap, that would be just like the council to do. What to do? Naruto stood as if dazed at this point, trying to figure things out. He knew that being banished meant that he would no longer legally be a part of Konoha. So while they couldn't consider him a missing nin and send Hunter Nin after him, the laws of Konoha would no longer protect him outside its walls. Not from any ninja who might, just so happen, to cross paths with him while on a mission from the council. Shit. There goes Ogg-san's law to keep the truth about the Kyuubi and the seal secret. Now even my friends will hate me. Maybe I should leave before the council summons me, to get a head start. Since the elders have already informed me of my banishment, I can just leave a letter saying that they told me and that I left peaceably like they asked. That way the council can't charge me as a missing nin for leaving before they banished me. Sitting down on the floor and picking up a piece of scrap paper he was going to leave behind, Naruto began to write hastily. An hour later, Morino Ibiki and Mitarashi Anko were not happy campers. They were standing outside of an apartment, banging on the door. They had already checked everywhere else in Konoha for the Gaki who they were ordered to escort to the council room. I don't care if the Gaki is mourning the loss of his teammate or his mission's failure has him moping. I'm busting down the door if he doesn't answer it in the next 30 seconds. Anko yelled, seething. Half a minute later, Ibiki and Anko were looking at a dirty but empty apartment, the door laying busted on its floor. Quickly, Ibiki looked at the paper with the address that their current target lived at on it, and after quickly comparing it with the number on the door on the floor, said, well, it is the right room. Then where the hell is he? Better yet, where the hell is all his stuff? Anko was fuming as they looked through the empty apartment. Did the Gaki move and tell no one? Then again, I can't blame him for it if he did. I don't know, but Ibiki cut off as he noticed what appeared to be a note sitting on the kitchen countertop. Anko apparently noticed it too, as she picked it up and began reading quickly. Then her eyes bugged out for a second and she was out the door rushing towards the Hokage Tower, Ibiki right behind her and wondering, what got into her? And why does she look even more pissed than usual? Between Konoha and the Valley of the End, Naruto was running along the same path he had not 1 week ago, mainly because he figured this was the last way they would expect him to go. He couldn't go to Suna or Wave, because those were the first places they'd check. He was worried about heading for Iwa, since he does resemble the Yondaime and their hatred for anything reminiscent of the man was known throughout the shinobi world. He wouldn't head to Kiri, because he remembered Haku talking about the bloodline purges that cost him his family and his chance at a happy life. He hated the Mizukage with a passion for that. That leaves grass, Aim, Kumo, waterfall, snow, and a few other small independent countries and islands. Seeing as I killed Aoi, and he was an Aim Junin, that country is probably out. Maybe Kumo. They've been on shaky terms with Konoha since the Hyuga abduction incident, anyway, so they won't care that I'm on the run from Konoha. But since grass is closer right now, I'll go ahead and see what's there and make my decision based upon that. If Oto is in grass instead of beyond it, I'll be better off elsewhere. With that thought, Naruto jumped down into the large clearing ahead, gazing forward on the spires of bone that littered what was once a small, grass-covered flatland in the middle of a dense forest. Noticing a reddish upper torso with bones sticking out of its shoulders and back and a large bone spear on one arm, Naruto moved in for a look after he noticed that there was no breathing motion coming from the body. Kimimaro. I remember now what it felt like. To have no purpose. I'll search out a new purpose in this world, but I'll remember to not let someone like Orochimaru dictate or be my purpose. Even if you didn't mean to, you taught me that much. As Naruto gazed upwards into Kimimaro's lifeless eyes, he felt something strange in his mind and his chakra pool. At first, it felt like they were stretching outward, through his eyes and towards Kimimaro's corpse. Before he could seriously consider what was causing the feeling, there was a sudden pull and yank on his mind and chakra pool, followed by immense pain as it felt like they were both torn in two halves and one half of each blasted out of his body from his eyes, and towards Kimimaro's body. Back in Konoha, Tsunade had just sat back from finishing up her last stack of paperwork on her desk. Boom. The doors to the Hokage office burst open and Anko stormed in waving a small piece of paper with writing on it. Hokage-sama, what is the meaning of this? Slapping said paper onto the Hokage's desk, she glared at Tsunade. Ibiki chose that moment to finally make it to the office, panting at having chased Anko all the way there. Tsunade picked up the note and read it. Her hands, grip tightened, her eyes narrowed, and her eyebrows formed a crease between them. Looking up, she saw Anko pacing furiously, grumbling about, damn council bastards and the like, while Ibiki looked on with an eyebrow raised to show his curiosity. Mulling over her options, Tsunade decided to go for the direct, honest approach. Yes, the council banished Naruto. Ibiki looked shocked, while Anko looked ready to explode at her, Hokage or not. No, I couldn't stop it. At this she received a skeptical look from both people in her office. I thought the Hokage's approval was needed for any punishment of that severity, Ibiki said, closing the doors, then leaning against them with his arms crossed. Tsunade sighed and rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Well, unfortunately for us, between Sensei's death and my appointing as Godime, the council passed a few laws to give them more power in certain situations. Anko and Ibiki were silent, waiting for more information. Although Anko was much more tense now. Not that I could blame her, thought Tsunade. Next to Naruto, Anko is the second most unjustly hated shinobi among our ranks by the biased fools of the council. The new laws allow them to assign individual punishments for shinobi who fail their missions, and if they get the approval of more than half the village civilians and shinobi first, they can bypass any need for the Hokage, but only if the punishment is either community service or banishment. Anko had a sharp intake of breath at this, and Ibiki winced in silent sympathy for her. What I want you two to do is go out and continue looking for Naruto for another hour to buy him some more time. At the end of the hour, return here. The three of us will then proceed to the council chambers, where I will inform them that I told Naruto myself and he has already departed from the village. Tsunade had a smirk on her face when she said this. Ibiki and Anko almost felt sorry for the council members she would inform of her view on the matter. Ibiki and Anko left the Hokage's office quietly, both planning to ask about Naruto's whereabouts at their own favorite hangouts. The bar and the dango stand, respectively. Naruto's mindscape. It's about time you awakened, kid. Maybe now we can figure out why the hell he is in here with you. At the sound of that voice, Naruto's eyes shot open. He'd only ever heard it once before, after Ero Sennin shoved him off that cliff, but he doubted anyone could forget this voice after hearing it once. Kyuubi, what the hell were you doing that you pulled a full 2 tails of my chakra and pushed them out in a single second? I didn't even know you ninja had jutsu that could use that much chakra in one go. What hit me? All I remember was Naruto-san. The presence of the third voice was so unexpected, Naruto almost pulled his neck from the speed he turned around to face its source. When he saw the speaker, his jaw practically left his face. Pointing a finger at the source of his shock, Naruto stammered out, why you? You're dead. How can you be here? Staring apathetically at him from a short distance, was Kimimaro. Sans curse seal. This is originally where I planned to end the chapter, but I decided to continue on from here. Kudos to anyone who has already guessed exactly what Kekkei Genkai I just gave Naruto. Those who haven't are about to find out. And yes, I know I majorly changed the original operation of the bloodline, as far as I understand. I know no more than you, Naruto-san. But you dead me, huh? Naruto's face was contorted in a manner that reminded one of a donkey. That along with his words made it clear that he was confused to the point that even his thoughts weren't coherent. Maybe I should come down there and look more closely at this. Something's off about your eyes, kid. Naruto turned back to look at the fox, but before he could even ask what it was talking about, its massive silhouette simply vanished. Near panicking at the thought that it wasn't in the cage anymore, Naruto was even more stunned by what happened next. Hey, kid, I'm down here. Even though the voice was still obviously Kyuubi's, it also held a certain femininity to it that Naruto wasn't expecting at all. Looking down, Naruto's eyes widened even further. Wearing a kimono covered with a design of red, white, and black roses on thorny vines was a woman of 5 feet 11 inches with, from what Naruto could see, a toned, lean body with a generous bust size. Her hair was black, straight, and went to the middle of her back, and her eyes were a reddish-orange with slits for pupils. On her face were 6 whisker marks just like his. If it weren't for the fact that she had fox ears on top of her head, 9 bushy fox tails behind her, and she was on the other side of the bars, Naruto would have just assumed that he had a really attractive visitor to his mind. Kyuubi is a woman, and a really beautiful one at that. Kyuubi's own eyes widened even further as she could now clearly see what was off about Naruto's eyes. A single black ring around the pupil told her all she needed to know. A small, vulpine grin made its way onto her face as she thought, by Kami. I didn't even think any of that bloodline still existed anymore. This changes so much, and much more makes sense now. Well, that explains it. Quote. Naruto was still trying to wrap his head around all the surprises that had been in it recently. What? So I'm a woman. You thought the strongest of the Biju was actually a man, didn't you? Huh. Naruto shook his head as if to clear it, then got a focused look on it as if thinking hard, what explains what? Everything. Seeing him about to burst into a bunch of headache-rendering questions, Kyuubi decided to beat him to the punch by answering them. Your eyes are the mark of your bloodline activating, the Rinnegan, and that explains the chakra drain we felt, the pain that caused you to pass out, and what Kimimaro is doing here in your mindscape when he's supposed to be dead and passed on. The last human I knew of having this was the Six-Path Sage. I honestly never expected to see that Kami and Shinigami blessed gift again. Kami and Shinigami blessed my Kekkei Genkai. I have a Kekkei Genkai. What does it do and how does it explain this? He gestured to Kimimaro's presence in his mindscape to expand on what he meant. Kami and Shinigami did bless this Kekkei Genkai. How else would it be able to pull the minds and souls of the dead out of heaven and hell? Naruto almost lost his jaw again at that. There is several aspects to this bloodline. First off, you will gain several bodies, from the corpses of powerful warriors, to fight for you. The pull on my chakra must have been to erase Kimimaro's curse seal while keeping the stage 2 form and the benefits without the downsides. Your chakra that was pulled from you revitalized Kimimaro's chakra pools, healed all physical and biological damage from his body, and sealed away his body for you to call out when you need it, so it can rest when you don't. Second, each body will have an independent chakra pool of its own that will be the same size as your own pool at peak. This chakra pool refills like a regular body's, with food and rest, but also refills without those things when it's sealed within you. Thirdly, each body you get will specialize in one form of jutsu and one chakra type, usually an elemental type. Kimimaro I would say would be your kenjutsu body, and would be your earth chakra type. What this means is that Kimimaro's body can control earth-type chakra, even if it isn't his own, by focusing his eyes on it and willing it to do what he wants. Fourth of all your bodies will share a single mind, yours. You will experience all the senses of your other bodies at once and will control them all with a single mind. This is one of the strengths and weaknesses of the bloodline. Because of this aspect, when one of your bodies, even your own, is killed, all you have to do to revive it is pump enough chakra from any of your bodies into it to repair the damage. Since your mind is shared by all your bodies, even if your original body is killed, the other bodies still carry your mind, so you can still revive it. Wouldn't my brain overload from the sensory input? Fifthly, it brings back the soul and mind that originally owned the body and cages it within your mindscape so you can learn to use the body to its fullest from them. If they refuse to teach you, you'll absorb information from their mind as you sleep, but otherwise they can teach you while you're awake by instructing through mind talking. The mind and soul are only released to go back to their place of judgment when you have mastered the use of their body, but if you die with them still in your mindscape, they'll simply cease to exist. Last of all, until you master a body, it will only be slightly better than you in its chosen area of expertise. The bodies are better than yours because they are either better built or they have been better trained in that particular specialty. Call it muscle memory or chakra coil memory. But you can't use them that well because you don't know how to consciously do so. Konoha. Guilt. That was the main feeling she had right now. Well, that and worthlessness. She had failed both of them, each in their own way. Sasuke, She wasn't good enough to convince him to stay or strong enough to force him to stay. Once again he left her in the dust. But worse, was Naruto. She made him make that promise, knowing he was the only one good enough, strong enough to get Sasuke back. She made him make that promise, knowing it crushed his heart to do so. That promise, because of it, he held back for her sake, and she had lost them both, her first love and the guy she had begun to see as a big brother. What good do you think your moping around is gonna do? Spoke her inner voice. What else can I do? Sakura was alone in her room, and she spoke quietly, so she knew no one but her inner persona could hear her. Get off your, train yourself into the ground, and go drag Sasuke's back here. Then, when they're applauding us as a hero, tell them you want Naruto back as your reward. It's the perfect plan, cha. In the silence that followed, Sakura began to think about what her inner self had said. She knew her only chance of beating Sasuke was getting training equal to being the apprentice of a Sannin, but she figured Tsunade was too busy being Hokage to help her, and she'd sooner go to the hubby Tem himself than ask the super pervert for personal anything. The only thing she could think of was becoming a wandering nin. They weren't limited to a single area's specialties, they had all the privacy needed for intense training in the wilds, and they got toughened up by having to live without the amenities of a hidden village. And we could run into Naruto. Together, nothing could stop us from bringing Sasuke back. Plus, if he helps, the council won't have any choice but to see him as a hero equal to me for bringing Sasuke back. They'll have to let him back in, cha. Figuring that this was her best option, Sakura started packing her things for a long-term mission. Unnoticed by her, Kakashi stood on a tree branch, having stopped by to check up on his last remaining student. Seeing her pack up her things, he quickly left to inform the Hokage of what he thought was taking place. Outside Sakura's house several minutes later, Sakura stepped out of her family's house to find a pair of Anbu waiting for her. Haruno Sakura, please follow us to the Hokage's office, immediately. Any resistance will be met with extreme force. I have no problem coming with you. This was met with a questioning, from one of the Anbu. I was going to have to talk with her anyway. This way saves me from waiting or making an appointment. The Anbu shrugged, then one laid a hand on Sakura's shoulder and shunshine to the Hokage's office doors. Go ahead and enter. She's waiting for you. Sakura stepped into the office to face an angry-looking Tsunade. She jumped when the door slammed behind her, revealing a frowning Kakashi who leveled her with a stern gaze. She briefly wondered what was wrong before realizing that they could see her stuffed full pack. She quickly took a proper formal stance before the Hokage and began to speak. Hokage-sama, I request permission to take an indefinite leave for the purpose of training outside the village. Sakura wished she had a camera. The look of shocked surprise on Tsunade's face was a once-in-a-lifetime view for most people. Haruno Sakura, your request is declined. But, Hokage-sama, Tsunade slammed her hands on her desk, silencing Sakura's protests. I will not have you chasing willy-nilly after that Uchiha. This isn't about Sasuke. Tsunade leveled Sakura with a critical glare as she calmed herself to better make her argument. Editing out anything about her inner voice, Sakura bared the skeleton of her plans to Kakashi and the Godime. Naruto's mindscape. And that's how I can help improve your Kekkei Genkai. Although I can only do this because you're my host, otherwise Kami and Shinigami would get pretty pissed that I played around with their gift. At this point both Kimimaro and Naruto were speechlessly staring at Kyuubi with eyes the size of dinner plates. Kyuubi simply stood with her arms crossed waiting for the reaction she knew would be coming. Blinking, Naruto breaks out of his dumbfounded state. Why would you do all that? I mean, what's in it for you? Or, what's the catch? Putting on a fake hurt expression, Kyuubi asked, what makes you think I'm doing this at a cost to you? Naruto narrowed his eyes at her. I am familiar with how bloodlines were made. They were given to humans who either did something on their own that a superior being favored, or they had to perform tasks to repay the being who gave them their bloodline. You guys don't do this kind of stuff for free. Kyuubi chuckled for a few seconds, then smiled at Naruto. Good. Your mind has gotten sharper from this. Yes, I'll be getting something out of this. A little freedom. And, no, I won't be fully free of the seal, because all that would accomplish is pissing Shinigami off. That's not something on my to-do list. Naruto squinted into space, a slight frown on his face and his head tilted to the side in thought. Now that you mention it, my mind does feel like I'm thinking better. Why is that? Did you do something? No, that's actually a facet of your bloodline, as well as a safeguard Kami placed into it. Your brain is designed for extreme multitasking. I mean, you do have multiple bodies sending constant sensory input into your brain, while at the same time you have to send complex instructions to each individual one of those bodies on how to move its muscles and mold its chakra while at the same time interpreting what its senses are telling you in order to determine what that body should do next. Multiply that by however many bodies you have in addition to your own, and you can see why simply transplanting the eyes into another person won't work. Oh, if my brain is so great, why'd I have so much trouble with focusing it in the academy? Because you tried focusing like a normal person focuses. Think of your mind as divided into segments. You consciously focused a segment on the lecture, but all the other segments kept doing their own things, distracting you because you weren't controlling them. Oh, then how is having a divided mind a good thing? Let me give you some examples from your moments of genius that have gotten you called the number one most surprising ninja. During your first fight with Zabuza, when you came up with that plan to free Kakashi, a part of your mind was watching for you to get attacked, a part was watching for Tazuna to get attacked, a part was worrying about your teammates and sensei, a part was thinking about what you had on you, and another part was trying to figure out how to get Sasuke and Kakashi out of their situations. The last part, your conscious mind, put the input from all the separate parts together, allowing you to form that plan, saving both Sasuke and Kakashi. Heck, even your ability with Kage Bunshin has partly to do with this. Even with enough chakra, most ninja can only divide their minds so many times, further limiting the number they can create. Since your mind was made to be divided, however, you can make far more Kage Bunshins. Or even how you figured out the first and last stage of the Rasengan. The first stage, one part of your mind was trying to figure out how to pop the balloon while another part was watching the cat play with one, and the third part was listening to the first two to give you the idea for how to do it. And the final stage, after a week of focusing on nothing but completing the third stage of the Rasengan, you get in a life or death struggle against Orochimaru and Kabuto, where your mind is divided amongst your personal fight with Kabuto, Tsunade's and Shizune's welfare, watching out for any more hungry snake attacks, and figuring out how to hit Kabuto with a Rasengan when you need two hands to hold it steady, and suddenly you figure out how to perform a complete Rasengan. By this point, I was wondering what was up with the repeated odd timing of your flashes of genius, but since I assumed the Rinnegan was no more, I never would have guessed the true cause. That, when you put it that way, it actually all kinda makes perfect sense. I guess you were right, me having this gift does explain everything. I sense we have spoken more than enough. You should awaken now, or else you'll lose the head start you gave yourself over anyone the council sent after you. Yeah, how do I wake up from this? Like so. A sudden burst of red chakra flew out of the cage and blew Naruto out of his mindscape. An image of Naruto standing there, looking at Kimimaro, remained in Naruto's mindscape. If Kimimaro or Kyuubi wanted to communicate with Naruto to help train him, this piece of his mind was there to do it with. Back to the physical plane. Naruto opened his eyes slowly and pushed himself off the ground to look around. The only thing he found off about the clearing was the disappearance of Kimimaro's corpse. Seeing as several hours had passed, he judged from the position of the sun in the sky, Naruto quickly took off in the direction he was last headed, towards grass. I'll find out more about my bloodline and practice it some there. Better to get out of Hai no Kuni before I get caught by a patrol or one of the council's lackeys. Unknown to Naruto, 3 Konoha shinobi followed in his footsteps not 10 minutes after he left the clearing. Rice Country. Having made his way to being within sight of a small town in Rice Country, Naruto stopped and went into the woods by the side of the road. Finding a small clearing, Naruto sat in a meditation position, closed his eyes, and prepared to talk to his tenants. Time we got to work, kid. Alright, so how do I call out Kimimaro's body or use this bloodline? Just pour a little chakra into your eyes and repeat after me. Having sensed the use of chakra in the nearby forest, the three Konoha ninja went off the road to the city to investigate it. Right as they were within sight of the small clearing Naruto sat in, they heard him say something. First path of sacrifice. There was a large puff of smoke, which cleared to reveal a level 2 curse seal Kimimaro facing Naruto, his eyes a vibrant blue with one black ring in the iris. The kunoichi shrieked and the two shinobi gasped, a demon. Naruto's eyes snapped open and both his heads jerked towards the sound of those voices. Naruto and his other body, Kimimaro, were face to face with Jiraiya, Sakura, and Kakashi. As far as pairings go, this story will definitely not be a Naruto x Sakura. Nothing against the pairing, I enjoy reading it sometimes, but in this FIC, Sakura will view Naruto as a little big brother, acts like a little kid when safe, but a protective big brother when in danger, not a love interest. And Naruto will accept that and finally move on. Sasuke x Sakura is also out. Naruto x Femme Kyuubi or OC are possibilities, as are some of the filler arc girls. Right now, except for the exceptions of Narusaku or Sasusaku, the pairings are wide open. Oh, and since this is my first FIC, it will not be a harem FIC. At the most, Naruto might end up with 2 women in his life, but that's only if I get a strong enough request from my audience for it. Also, for those who questioned the whole law involving Naruto's banishment, press Ctrl+F, and search for SIFMA, yes, it's all in capital letters. Then read the conversation from there until you get to the next SIFMA, and all those questions of yours should be explained. Or you could just start reading and keep going until you get to that part, your choice. Last chapter. Having sensed the use of chakra in the nearby forest, the three Konoha ninja went off the road to the city to investigate it. Right as they were within sight of the small clearing Naruto sat in, they heard him say something. First path of sacrifice. There was a large puff of smoke, which cleared to reveal a level 2 curse seal Kimimaro facing Naruto, his eyes a vibrant blue with one black ring in the iris. The kunoichi shrieked and the two shinobi gasped, a demon. Naruto's eyes snapped open and both his heads jerked towards the sound of those voices. Naruto and his other body, Kimimaro, were face to face with Jiraiya, Sakura, and Kakashi. Chapter 2. For a split second, no one moved. Unfortunately, shinobi don't stay still for very long. Sakura began trembling, staring at the face of the demon next to Naruto, her arms reflexively curling in front of her to protect herself as she took slow, trembling steps backwards. Kakashi reacted almost the opposite way, headband up and preparing to perform the Reikiri on the demon, threatening his former and current students, ready to give up his life if it was necessary to protect his precious people from a demon, like his sensei did. Jiraiya's reaction was probably the most mild of the three. As he looked between Naruto's eyes and the demon's eyes, rapidly dawning comprehension passed across his features, mixed with some surprise as well. Naruto found himself in the worst spot he could imagine. Because he had no time to train himself in controlling the second body, or receiving sensory input from it, he couldn't even distinguish between Kimimaro's POV and his own. So it seemed to him as though Kakashi's and Sakura's reactions were pointed at himself. Guess they already told my generation about the Kyuubi, if Sakura's reaction is anything to go by. And I thought Kakashi-sensei actually cared about me, but judging from the look on his face, it's like he's waited his whole life to get the opportunity to do this to me. Great. I wouldn't stand a chance of fighting Kakashi normally, and between this feeling of disorientation and my inexperience with fighting with my bloodline, I'll have even less than that. Looking over to Jiraiya, Naruto saw the only sight that held any hope of getting out of this situation alive. Fortunately, Jiraiya was aware of his companion's actions and reacted before things escalated to the point of no return. His right arm shot in front of Kakashi and blocked him from a straight-on assault. His left hand found its way to Sakura's right shoulder, giving a comforting squeeze. When both turned to look at him, he gave a grandfatherly smile, the kind the Sandaime used to be known for, the kind that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. Sakura's fears seemed to ebb away, and Kakashi's desperate aggressiveness calmed. Calm down, Kakashi, Sakura. Things aren't what they seem at first glance. A confused look crossed the two's faces at Jiraiya's statement, and as they turned back to face Naruto they took more defensive, less aggressive stances, waiting for Jiraiya's explanation of his strange statement. Instead of launching the explanation right away, he struck up a conversation with the still and silent Naruto. So, when did you activate the Rinnegan, Naruto? And how come you never told me? The other three looked stunned, two of them wondering, what's the Rinnegan? And Naruto thinking, he knows what the Rinnegan is by sight of it alone. It happened on the way here, so I couldn't really tell you before now. And how did you know what it was anyway? Even she hadn't seen it in this world since the six paths sage. Naruto and his other body spoke back and forth, having trouble with distinguishing the separate vocal cords and mouth muscles. Sakura looked confused, but the other two grew alarmed at the implication of Naruto having conversations with the kitsune, and treating it like it was an everyday occurrence. Naruto, how long have you been in communication with her? Jiraiya asked, trying to be subtle about the Kyuubi with the presently unknowing audience. Who is this woman you're all talking about? How could she have seen the Six Paths Sage and still be alive right now? Sakura blurted out, hating being out of the loop and a little freaked by the way the demon and Naruto talked in turns between each other. Jiraiya and Kakashi stiffened at the thought of breaching that secret with Sakura, while both of Naruto's bodies started to chuckle. When all three looked at him odd, he explained, I would have thought the council revoked that law the first chance they got. I'm surprised she doesn't already know about it just yet. That's what I find so funny. Don't know about what yet? What law? That I am the container the Yondaime sealed, the Kyuubi, no kitsune, into. That statement prompted an uncomfortable, shocked silence, followed by Sakura fainting standing up. Well, at least we can continue the conversation without needing to hide things anymore. Jiraiya and Kakashi sweat dropped at that. Jiraiya quickly pressed his earlier question, so when did you start conversing with the Kyuubi? Shortly after, the Rinnegan activated. She seems nicer now that I have it. A puzzled look crossed Kimamaro's face. Alright, not to change topics, but what does the Rinnegan have to do with the current situation? Kakashi asked, still confused about Naruto's other body. The demon body standing next to Naruto isn't a demon at all. The Rinnegan allows Naruto to take a powerful corpse and turn it into a new body for himself to control, among other abilities. Even if the body used to hold a demon's mind, the body is now fully subservient to Naruto's mind and will. It isn't any more threatening than Naruto himself is, so unless Naruto plans to attack us, the demon body won't do so either. How do you know even that much about the Rinnegan? You recognized it by sight, and you mentioned it had more abilities than those linked to the bodies. She didn't mention anything like that. At the time I started teaching the boy who would become the Yondaime, I had picked up two other students. They were orphans, a boy and a girl. The boy, Nagato, was a distant relative of your father's, and he had the Rinnegan. Most of what I know about it, I learned from teaching him and researching the Six Paths Sage to help find ways to better train him. Unfortunately, during the war, there were many casualties, and Nagato and the girl were two of them. Despite the fact that Nagato and your father were related, your father never activated the Rinnegan, so all who knew about it simply assumed he didn't have the genes for it. I guess now I know it was simply a fluke that he never awakened it. A shock went through Naruto's system. Kimamaro puffed out of existence and his Rinnegan turned off as the truth of Jiraiya's statement hit him like a ton of bricks. Not that Jiraiya had seen another Rinnegan user or trained him, but that Jiraiya knew who Naruto's father is or was. Shock gave way to anger in the blink of an eye, and Naruto's fists clenched tight. His face twisted into a scowl and he lowered it so his eyes couldn't be seen through his bangs. You knew, he growled out. And you never told me. Jiraiya could feel the sweat roll down his forehead as he realized the monumental screw-up of a slip of the tongue he'd pulled off now. Prior to this occasion, he'd made certain to never, ever mention Naruto's parents as such in anyone's presence. When Naruto had asked him about it, or if he knew where the Yondaime had got him at the last minute like that, he'd even lied to his face and told him he didn't know. Jiraiya realized he had one chance to do damage control on his trust relationship with Naruto right now. And that was by telling him the absolute truth right here and now. Naruto, your parents, they were Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, and Uzumaki Kushina, formerly of Whirlpool. Your mother died giving childbirth and your father, you know how he died. Naruto looked like he won the lotto only to have his puppy get run over. Kakashi looked like somebody had transplanted a dinner plate in place of his good eye. And Sakura, who had begun to come to right before Jiraiya made that statement, fainted again, this time falling down. The soft thump of Sakura hitting the ground brought all their attention to her, and Jiraiya quickly made a decision. We should carry out this conversation somewhere more private. Let's go to the nearby town and take residence up at the inn. Kakashi shouldered Sakura and headed back to the road, followed by Jiraiya a few seconds later. Naruto stood still, staring at the ground for a minute, then took off after them. I have to know more. In at the village, Kakashi laid Sakura down on one of the beds in the room he'd be sharing with her, then went to the room for Naruto and Jiraiya, so they could continue the conversation as a group, and so he'd be able to put off answering Sakura's many questions that were sure to come once she woke up. Once Kakashi was in the room, Jiraiya shut the door and performed that silence and blindness seal, which kept all sounds and sights inside the room in while still letting such from outside in. Naruto was sitting on one bed, and Kakashi and Jiraiya sat on the other bed, facing him. So, Naruto, what are you doing in this country, anyway? Wave or Suna, I could see, but you headed to the country we suspect Orochimaru keeps his base in. Why is that? Kakashi questioned. Naruto's eyes widened a bit at the knowledge that Orochimaru keeping his base in this country was almost certain now, but was quick to answer. I honestly wasn't certain if Orochimaru's base was here or in the following countries, but I figured if the council sent their dogs after me, this is the last direction they'd expect me to go. I plan to hightail it out of here at the first definite sign that Orochimaru has set up shop here, though. Between his unnerving obsession with little boys and his equal obsession with Kekkei Genkai, I wouldn't want to chance him taking any interests in me. Naruto shuddered at the thought. So, what are you three doing out here where you suspect Orochimaru's base is? Well, Jiraiya said, it like this, see. Konoha, Hokage's office. Tsunade-sama, are you sure it was wise to send those three out to retrieve the Uchiha? Shizune asked, looking troubled. It has less to do with the Uchiha and more to do with Naruto. Sakura's plan wasn't foolproof, but it's better than sitting around doing nothing. Even if it fails, we'll still have a kunoichi undergoing real training out there, and Jiraiya and Sakura can keep a lookout for Naruto to help him out some. It's a win-win situation. Either Naruto gets back his rights as a Konoha shinobi or they can offer Naruto support and training. Tsunade said across her steepled fingers. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Unnoticed by either of them, a man wearing an Anbu mask bearing the mark of Nei eavesdropped on the conversation, and went to report it to his master. Back at the inn, so you see, that's the main plan. It was mostly Sakura's idea, but after hearing it, the rest of us jumped on board and refined it. Now that we've found Naruto, we can change the backup plan some to account for you not having to look for him, Jiraiya-sama. Yeah, we can. What's this backup plan and how does me being here change it? Jiraiya cleared his throat, then said, in the event that the second Sasuke retrieval mission meets failure, I am to take Sakura as my official apprentice, and you as my unofficial apprentice, and then I am to train both of you to be strong enough to take down Sasuke on your own. Kakashi will return to Konoha to give a report on the mission's failure and Sakura's status as my apprentice immediately after the mission fails. Ah, Naruto mumbled. So, we start out to find Sasuke tomorrow, yeah. Yeah, so let's try to get a good night's sleep, Yaki. Kakashi went back to the other room, and sighed when he saw Sakura awake and aware. I really doubt I'll be getting a lot of sleep tonight. As soon as he finished this thought, the questioning began. As Naruto laid down in bed, he realized that amidst the back and forth questions, he'd forgotten all about the questions he really wanted the answers to. Damn it, I forgot to ask for more about my parents. I'll have to spend the rest of the mission pestering them with questions to get back at them for distracting me like that. Haha. Timeskip of a few days. All went less than well, as Sasuke was nowhere to be found in the base that they'd searched and Sasama's friend was beyond saving. Naruto hadn't even gotten in any practice with his bloodline, figuring that Kimimara's former body would definitely freak Sasama out. Outside Orochimaru's newly ruined lair, Sakura and Naruto were doing their best to comfort a crying Sasama, while Jiraiya and Kakashi stood off to the side talking quietly. Kakashi, I need you to do something for me before you return to Konoha. What for? It'll help in training Naruto's Kekkei Genkai in a way I cannot easily do alone. And it will help Naruto's Kekkei Genkai itself. It shouldn't take you too long. Alright, then, what is it you need me to do? An hour later, Sasama is reunited with the anti-Orochimaru Fuma clan members, and the four who once called Konoha their home were leaving the village the Fuma clan was based in. About 10 minutes walk out, Jiraiya suddenly stops walking. Everyone else stops and looks back at him. Jiraiya pulls out a scroll and says, "It's time we got the two of you training." Then he tosses the scroll to Sakura, and says, "That scroll contains exercises to increase your chakra capacity and physical capabilities. Until you can complete all the exercises in that scroll, you won't be ready for personal training of any kind under me, Sakura." She opens the scroll and looks at it for a minute before looking back up at Jiraiya, pale-faced. Jiraiya motions to the woods to the right, and Sakura trudges off into them with her head down to work on the exercises in the scroll. Once she was out of sight, Jiraiya and Kakashi both look at Naruto, whom is practically jumping out of his skin from containing his excitement for training. Suddenly, Naruto looks at Kakashi like something clicked in his head. "Hey, Kakashi-sensei, aren't you supposed to be on your way to Konoha to give those reports?" "Actually, yes. But Jiraiya here asked me to do something to help with your training, a specific task, and I agreed, so I'll be around you for a little longer." Naruto looked at Jiraiya, who had his arms crossed and a smug grin on his face. "Naruto," Jiraiya began, "the first part of your training in the Rinnegan must be to get you accustomed enough to having multiple bodies that you can effectively use them in combat situations. When I used this training with Nagato, we called it long distance and multiple places training. In order to perform this training, we first need you to call out one of your bodies." "Right. Hey, Kyuubi, how do I do this again?" "Sai, just push chakra out your eyes and say, 'The first path of sacrifice.'" When the poof of smoke cleared, the level 2 curse seal form of Kimimara's was once again revealed to the two shinobi. "So what do I do now?" Naruto and Kimimaro asked. "You probably notice you are having a difficult time telling which body is giving you which set of sensory input, right?" Naruto just nodded his head to Jiraiya's question. "This is because you are receiving the exact same information through two sets of senses that are a mere 2 feet apart, creating a disagreement in what they perceive as one view is just slightly askew of the other, messing with your mind. The best way to deal with this is to move one body to a completely different area, then get used to using two bodies with one mind. Once your mind has gotten acquainted with this exercise, it can recognize each body's unique signature, and it will be possible to have two of your bodies next to each other without the input messing up your coordination. In other words, it's easier to start with your bodies separated and then work towards each other." Okay. What your second body and Kakashi will be doing is going back with these." Here Jiraiya held up 4 scrolls with seals written all over them, and picking up the corpses of those other members of the Odo 4 to use later for more bodies. "While you get used to normal ninja movement with your unusual second body, it has a tail with Kakashi. I'll be training the main you right here in various things as well as talking about what all I'll be teaching you while you're with me. That should help you adjust to using two bodies simultaneously much faster." I think I get it, but..." Naruto attempted to move Kimimara's foot, but wound up stumbling forward himself. "How am I supposed to even follow Kakashi away from here when I can't even coordinate my movements well enough to walk the right body?" Kakashi took a few steps forward and placed one hand on Kimimaro, the other forming a basic one-handed seal. "You don't. I take care of that." With a swirl of leaves, Kakashi had Shunshined Kimimaro and himself closer to the border between Rice and Fire Country, leaving behind a momentarily disoriented Naruto and a smiling Jiraiya. Jiraiya pats Naruto on the shoulder and gestures to a bench by the side of the road. Let's sit down and talk about what you'll be learning under me in the foreseeable future. Naruto slowly made his way to the bench and sat down almost gingerly, looking at Jiraiya the whole while. Jiraiya sat next to him, relaxing on the bench before he looked at Naruto seriously. We'll be going over a lot, so to make it easier for you to remember, I'll split it into two simple categories: training to help you with your Rinnegan, and training that has pretty much nothing to do with your Rinnegan. For the Rinnegan, I'll be teaching you the proper way to use those eyes, chakra control, elemental chakra training, taijutsu, strategy, and various ninjutsu to help out with the main weakness of the Rinnegan for you. Wait, what weakness is that? Naruto was beginning to adjust to having two separate bodies now that they weren't in constant conflict with each other. While using the secondary body powers of the Rinnegan, it is dangerous for you to use the Kage Bunshin or any variation thereof. What? Why? While the body is out, the section of the mind that body is connected to is separated from the rest of your mind by a sort of bubble that allows you to discern sensory input and directions given to that body from your others. When you perform Kage Bunshin and its variations, it divides up your mind randomly. If its random division cuts into that bubble, your connection with that body will be permanently lost. It's the only way for you to permanently kill one of your secondary bodies. But, most of my skills and strategies in a fight revolve around my use of Kage Bunshin and the mass version. I can't even use the Rasengan without a Kage Bunshin there to hold it together for me. Alls I have left is Henge, Kawamiri, and low-level chakra control exercises. Which is exactly why we'll be working on that weakness by having you learn better taijutsu and more ninjutsu. I can tell you that other than the variations of Kage Bunshin, other clone jutsus, like the elemental clones, can still be used since they don't divide your mind, but rather make a temporary quick copy of it, which doesn't burst any of the bubbles for your other body's mind segments. Phew, that's kind of a relief. So, what else will I be training in? Naruto said. If I can learn a different clone technique, I can still use numbers to overwhelm my opponents. Well, as far as training that doesn't have to do with the Rinnegan directly, I'll be working with you on your stealth, espionage skills, dispelling genjutsu, using the Kage Bunshin to the full potential it was made for, some Toad Sage arts if we have the time, politics, economics, debate logic, manners and customs, and your people skills. Naruto had furrowed eyebrows and a frown on his face at the end of Jiraiya's list. Not to sound ungrateful, but why do I need any help or training with those things towards the end? And I thought we just agreed my Kage Bunshin were a danger to use. Jiraiya frowned and began waving a finger in the air, as though scolding a child. Listen more carefully to what I say and think about things before you assume anything. Kage Bunshin have uses other than those you are familiar with, and it's only dangerous to use them while you have any secondary bodies out. As for everything from politics onward, consider those skills that are part of everyday life for wandering nins like yourself, and they are also a necessary part of your espionage and infiltration skills. What good would having an excellent false background story and a flawless disguise do if you knew nothing about the politics of the area you claim to be from? How can you pretend to run a business if you have no idea how to do it for real? Or how would you even know which kind of business to claim you're looking to set up if you have no idea about the economics of the supply and demand balance in the area for various goods and services? How will you pretend to belong to high society if your manners are atrocious and you follow none of the customs because you don't know them? How can you expect your cover to not be blown if you resolve all your arguments with fists instead of words? Naruto found himself speechless, unsure of what to say as his sensei lectured him about the importance of those things he had questioned the value of learning. Jiraiya sighed before continuing, even when not on an infiltration mission, wandering nin need to have skills and knowledge in all those areas in order to keep themselves alive. Naruto looked at Jiraiya, head tilted to the side and eyes wide open, and asked, "What do you mean, sensei? How could not knowing those things kill me?" Jiraiya got a thoughtful frown on his face and crossed his arms over his chest in a serious manner. Many different ways. Say you didn't consider the political environment of the country you were fleeing into before you went there. If you had fled to water country or earth country, you could very easily be dead right now. Due to all the civil wars and the bloodline purge, people in water country barely trust the person across the street in their house, so you can guess how well they trust outsiders, not to mention outsiders with keke genke. To them, wandering nin and missing nin are equally as threatening and equally as hated. Don't get me started on how Aiwa would react to a wandering nin who was practically the spitting image of the Yondaime Hokage. As for economics, you need to know how to make money if you plan on anything other than becoming a completely self-sufficient hermit who lives only off the land and what he makes with his own two hands, or becoming a petty thief like those Fuma clan members were acting like before I set them straight. If you do get clients, being able to be mannerly, observing the proper customs, and having good people skills are necessary to maintain a good reputation with clients so they might recommend you to their associates or friends. And solving all your problems with your fists first and your brain second is a good way to wind up in bingo books, and then any bounty hunter or ninja looking for a quick buck will look to kill you at the first opportunity. You don't exactly have a village you can run to if you get in a tough spot, now do you? Naruto bowed his head. No, I don't. Suddenly his head jerked up. She isn't there. Jiraiya blinked at Naruto's sudden random statement, confused for the moment. With Kakashi and Kimimaro. After looking for about 10 minutes among the chopped up trees, Kakashi decided to speed things up manually. Performing the necessary hand seals and using some of his blood, Kakashi summoned his nin dogs. Naruto looked over to see what the puff of smoke was about. Oi, Kakashi, what is it you summoned us for this time? Pakun asked. There should be the body of a young woman in this general area, but me and Naruto can't find her anywhere. Can you help me out, please? Kakashi asked, knowing being polite to his summons helped. The summoned dogs spread out and quickly began searching for any trace of a young woman's scent in the area. After a minute, one of the dogs signaled and Kakashi, Naruto and Pakun all moved over to the dog. Pakun sniffed the ground at that spot and nodded to the dogs that had gathered round. Kakashi, a young woman was laying in this spot for about 5 days straight before someone came and moved her 2 days ago. And Kakashi, whoever this lady is, was still alive when they moved her. Kakashi and Naruto stiffened at the news. It was an unplanned for twist in what they expected. Kakashi asked, can you track the scent? Yeah, it hasn't rained since then, so unless they tried to lose their scent there'll be no problem with that. Good. Everyone but Pakun will follow the scent and signal when you get within 100 yards of the target, but don't allow anyone to see you. Pakun will come with me and Naruto as he can hear the signal from farther away than either of us. Pakun hopped on Kakashi's shoulder and the rest of the dogs took off after the scent. As Naruto and Kakashi jumped off into the trees and headed towards the valley where Sakin's and Ukin's corpses were supposed to be, Pakun took notice of the strange lack of orange in the cloaked form traveling with them in plain sight, as Naruto had borrowed a cloak to hide his unusual features as well as some kunai and shuriken from Kakashi right after the shunshin. So where's Naruto and who's Mr. Mysterious on our left here? Believe it or not, Pakun, that guy is Naruto. Kakashi could feel the disbelieving look Pakun directed at him. It's part of a bloodline he activated a few days ago. Gives him secondary bodies that differ completely from the original. Pakun appeared to be thinking. With Jiraiya and Naruto. After Naruto had explained his little outburst, which prompted Jiraiya to have pleasant recollections of his late student doing similar things, Jiraiya had decided to have Naruto perform a multi-function exercise. Naruto would learn about politics, while performing squats, sticking to the bottom of a branch and holding leaves in various places around his body with chakra. Yeah, Naruto thinks Jiraiya is a slave driver, too, but he loves the training and attention more than he hates the near impossibility of the task. That and he thrives on challenges. Kakashi and Kimimaro. Having arrived at the spot where Kankuro dumped the corpses out of his puppet, Naruto and Kakashi were relieved and not so relieved to find the bodies of Sakin and Ukin laying there. The unsettling part was the smell. Remember, it's been over a week and it rained heavily the day they were deposited here. A pair of soggy rotting corpses would absolutely reek after a week. Despite being a nin dog who could handle the smell of death, Pakun still had a strong preference to avoid the smell if it had time to fester. I'll let you two handle this. I'll regroup with you when you're done. Pakun leapt off of Kakashi and ran to someplace upwind of the decay. Trying not to tear up at the smell, Kakashi looked over at Naruto, and seeing that it was taking everything he had to not heave, decided to take some pity on him. Quickly looking over the scrolls Jiraiya had given them, Kakashi noticed one was labeled, Double Body. He quickly sealed the attached bodies of the brothers into the preservation storage scroll, that performed a low-level Fuden Jutsu to blow the stench downwind completely. Naruto was still dry heaving, but this time it was because of the writhing mass of maggots where the brothers' bodies were just minutes before. The sealing only took certain things in. Bacteria, viruses, insects in any form and parasites were all filtered out by the seals on the scrolls. It helped the preservation seals do their job. But it also left behind a nasty mess to see. Jiraiya and Naruto. After Naruto was past the dry heaving fit he had, which had earned a merciful break from Jiraiya when he was able to explain it between heaves, Jiraiya made Naruto return to what they were doing before. SIFMA. So, where should we start with the lesson on politics? Not that I'd want it to happen, but how about explaining the whole deal with me being banished when no one else on my team was? Alright, but this issue is complex, so prepare yourself for a very long conversation. Naruto simply nodded as he continued his upside-down squats with chakra control exercise. First of all, the law we're talking about gave the council the power to single out shinobi on a group mission that failed for individual or separate punishments if the right conditions were met. There were 3 major conditions to be met in order for the council to have this power. First, the shinobi must have been involved in a failed mission of C rank or greater. Second, the majority of the council, the majority of the shinobi population, and the majority of the civilian population must each agree, via 3 separate voting pools, that the council has the right to punish that specific shinobi in a specific way. Third, the punishment must either be banishment or public service without pay, basically being required to do so many hours of missions 1 rank lower than you're qualified for before you're allowed to go back to regular paid missions. You were involved in the failed Sasuke retrieval mission, which was higher than AC rank, and your punishment was banishment, so the first and third conditions were quite obviously met. I'm guessing you're wondering about the second condition, though. Naruto nodded his head, though he had a good idea of the cause. Okay. First, the council's vote. We both know exactly why and how much the majority of them hate you, Naruto, so I shouldn't have to explain how that voting pool got passed. Naruto sighed and nodded, figuring it was going to be more of the same for the other 2 as well. Second, the civilians vote. When people are faced with a horrible and/or personally traumatizing tragedy, it is human nature to have a need for someone or something to vent the pain, fear, and anger on. When the rightful person or thing to blame isn't within their power to vent upon, they find what they recognize as the next best thing, usually called a scapegoat. All the civilians who lived in Konoha before, during, and after the Kyuubi's attack would have needed such a scapegoat, and you were the most convenient. So it shouldn't be hard to figure out why the majority of the civilians voted to have you banished. Naruto's squats had begun to slow down, not from exhaustion but from a growing pain in his soul. The matter-of-fact way his sensei spoke about this was like he was saying it was fated to be like this, and Naruto was starting to believe it himself. Third, the shinobi vote. This was where things got iffy and people had to be convinced to make it go through. Shinobi, at least the good ones, are trained to separate their emotional and logical responses to a situation and choose the logical one in such occasions as this vote. So the majority of them wouldn't have allowed their pain or anger to cloud their judgment to vote to banish a perfectly good shinobi. Which was why Danzo had to step in before the vote and inform them of certain facts. Danzo took the mission reports for the Sasuke retrieval mission and convinced those logical shinobi that the seal must be weakening if that much of Kyuubi's chakra was leaking out into you. Even though they still didn't see you as Kyuubi incarnate, with Danzo giving them his version of the facts, they would be forced to see you as a primed explosive tag that would release the Kyuubi on those around you when you went off. What's the most logical thing to do with an explosive tag that cannot be destroyed or disarmed that is in your home, near your precious people? Get it as far away as possible. Naruto said. I don't know whether to feel sad that they saw me that way, are happy that they didn't throw me out because of blind hatred. Naruto's head suddenly snapped up, and he lost a few leaves in a moment of surprising realization. Wait a second, how the hell did Danzo get his hands on the mission report when only the Hokage is supposed to have access to those? And how did he know about me using the Kyuubi's chakra? I didn't have a chance to give my official report before the council handed down my sentence, and no other than Sasuke was there when I used it. I really doubt Sasuke decided to mail Konoha a letter telling them I used the red chakra. Jiraiya sighed. Remember that you were accused of letting Sasuke go intentionally, which would be insubordination by willing sabotage of the primary objective of the mission. In order to determine the accuracy of the charge, the council would receive access to 3 things in relation to it: hard evidence, of which there was none; an eyewitness, and given that the only 2 were either a missing nin or the accused, they chose to not bother hearing it, and the mission reports regarding the mission. Logically, since Danzo was on the council, and the council had access to the mission reports, Danzo had access to the mission reports. Also, while it is true that no Konoha loyal shinobi saw you using the Kyuubi's chakra, Kakashi did sense it as he approached the Valley of the End, and he would have included this fact in his unbiased report. Naruto didn't know how to take this information. He had been banished most likely because of something Kakashi-sensei had written in his part of the mission report. He understood why his sensei had done it, and he knew Kakashi never would have expected it to have these consequences for his student, but it still hurts him inside. So, why just me? Was it just the Kyuubi, or? While it is true that you were singled out by the council because of the Kyuubi, there are 2 reasons they could give those who accuse them of bigotry. First, assuming that the council actually votes them as being at fault for the failed mission, the odds that the civilian and shinobi populace would decide the same are extremely slim. Everyone else on that team was an heir or prodigy of an important clan in Konoha, so they all had social status with the civilians and strategic importance to the shinobi, without the drawbacks of the Kyuubi factor. Second, when a mission has multiple parts to it, and everyone except one person succeeds at doing their part of the mission, any mission failure will be blamed on the one who failed their part. Throughout the retrieval mission, your teammates, parts in the mission gradually became, keep this sound 4-5 member from interfering in the primary mission. If you look at it that way, everyone but you succeeded in their part of the mission, even if Shikamaru, Kiba, and Lee had help from the Suna siblings to do so. The only one who failed his part of the mission, technically, was you. So the failure of the mission could easily be pinned on you. SIFMA. Kakashi and Kimimaro. Having just sealed the huge guy from the crater Choji made Jirobo, and having sealed the 6-armed guy already Kidomaru, Naruto and Kakashi were ready to backtrack to Tayuya's former location to wait for the dogs to signal they'd locate her when Pakun's ears perked up a bit. Without seeing it, Kakashi still knew it happened. Which direction and how far are they signaling from, Pakun? After a moment, Pakun pointed about 40 degrees to the left of their current heading and said, about 2 kilometers in that direction. Kakashi and Naruto took off that way at a fast pace. 5 minutes later, as Kakashi and Naruto drop into the spot where the summoned dogs are waiting for them, a hail of kunai come out of seemingly nowhere and dispel the summoned dogs on the ground. Pakun, you're not a fighter, so get out of here. I'll resummon you some time after this is over. As the cloud of dispelled summons dissipated, 3 Konoha Anbu with the mark of Nay on their masks became visible. Stranger-san, it would be in your best interest to leave here now. Our business is with Kakashi-san, the one on the left spoke. I apologize, but I can't abandon my escort any more than he can abandon me, Naruto said. Then I apologize that you had to become a victim of circumstance. Kakashi-san, under orders of Danzo we are to eliminate yourself, Haruno Sakura, and Uzumaki Naruto at the first opportunity upon which any or all of you are separated from Jiraiya-san. For becoming a security threat to Konoha and aiding in the empowerment of said threat is the reason for your sentence. The 3 root Anbu charge at Kakashi and Naruto, one straight on and one flanking each side. Crap, I'm nowhere near ready for combat with this body yet. Did you forget we're here to offer some help? The voice of Kimimaro sounded out in Naruto's head. Naruto and Jiraiya, Arrow Sennin, I have to take a time out on training here. Kakashi and I just got attacked by Root, and I kinda need my full attention available for this fight to help Kakashi. Alright, sit at the base of the tree and meditate. I'll go see how Sakura is coming along with her conditioning. Kakashi and Kimimaro, practically snapping the downside of his headband up and flying through the hand seals faster than Naruto could blink while charging towards the Anbu who was going straight down the middle at them. Kakashi activated his Chidori and plowed it through the root Anbu's head in the same instant. All three living spectators to the event give pause as they are stunned by the suddenness of it, giving Kakashi the second needed to yank his arm out of the corpse's head and jump back close to his starting position. Kakashi, I didn't know you could form a Chidori that fast. Normally I can't. I had to use twice as much chakra as a normal Chidori to pull that off, but it was worth it. Kakashi-san is correct, Naruto-san. Instead of 1-3-on-2 fight, you now have 2 1-to-1 fights. Turning back to the Anbu that was charging his side, Naruto catches the tail end of the hand seals the Anbu was forming while Naruto was distracted. Crap. Doden. Doryu Dango no Jutsu. The Anbu called out. Naruto. Focus your eyes on the brownish energy forming in front of him. You feel that pressure in your mind. Yeah, when that thing comes up, push against the pressure in your head with all your might. As a dragon began to form out of the ground in front of the Anbu, Naruto started pushing as hard as he could. Seeing nothing happening as the dragon reared its head back to hurl the boulders bulging in its neck at him, Naruto pushed with everything he had. At the last second, the dragon jerked around and fired 2 boulders at the Anbu that was behind it. Being so surprised at the reversal of his own ninjutsu, he had no way to dodge either boulder, only to guard out of reflex. There was a slight crunching noise and a small grunt, but the Anbu stood mostly unshaken. What the heck? I just burned off like half my chakra to do that and he shrugs it off. Not all is as it appears, Naruto-san. You may not notice but he has very slightly shifted his weight to the right and he isn't as quick in the movements of his left hand. Most likely he has some hairline fractures in his left limbs and possibly some bruising of his ribs. He is slightly injured, as well as being off balance from the reversal of his ninjutsu. Given the stance he is taking and the way he has drawn kunai in both hands, it would appear that he is afraid of using any further ninjutsu and is going for an up-close fight. This is fortunate for us. And how exactly is going up close and personal with Anbu a good thing for us? Naruto thought, drawing a kunai in each of his hands and holding them in a reverse grip. 1. He won't be using ninjutsu against us with both his hands occupied and that's our major weakness right now. 2. He is injured and assuming that with our power we're a ninjutsu expert who would be weak against close-range fighters. 3. My body is your kenjutsu body so it does slightly better at close-armed combat than your own would. 4. Your chakra control is good enough that you should be able to form some weak bone masks under the skin with my body's bloodline, giving you a defensive advantage. While Kimimaro was talking to Naruto, Naruto was having a fight for his life. He barely dodged several critical strikes, and he knew if it weren't for this guy's injuries and his kenjutsu body being the one fighting, he would already be dead. Care to inform me on how to pull off this bone mask thing? Push chakra inside the bones the mask will form from, then pull the chakra out in the shape and place the bone mask will take. The denser and better controlled the chakra, the denser the bone mask and the faster it will form. Thanks. Deciding to try it out, Naruto formed a bone mask in the spaces between his ribs. Unfortunately, this reduced the flexibility of his torso and required a bit of his focus getting taken off the fight. Fortunately for Naruto, the Anbu was taking this opportunity to take a shot at Naruto's heart and the kunai in his right hand partially penetrated the bone mask before getting stuck on it. Seeing the opportunity, Naruto stabbed the Anbu's right bicep out of reflex, disabling that limb completely. With one of his opponent's arms useless and the other injured by the reversed ninjutsu earlier, Naruto found himself with a bit more breathing room than he had before. Yet he still berated himself. Damn it. All I've done so far was get lucky. I'm really going to have to train like nobody's business when this is through if I ever want to have a chance against Akatsuki. Naruto was quick to press his advantage, pressing with all his strength and speed in his attack on his enemy now that he didn't have to worry about counterattacks from the other hand. The Anbu meanwhile was struggling to hold his own, The hairline fracture he had from the boulder crashing into his arm earlier was beginning to spread and get worse from absorbing the impact of the blows he was blocking. The only thing keeping the fracture together at this point was the 1,000 miniature chakra strings he had silently formed in his arm to reinforce the bones and hold them in place together, just like he had done with his leg, but he was starting to tire from both physical and chakra exhaustion. Everything added up in their fight fairly quickly, and one slice that the Anbu failed to both block and dodge later, Naruto had a fair amount of blood on his arm with splatter on his face and the Anbu lay on the ground bleeding out through his jugular and choking on his own blood. Naruto stood stunned as blood dripped from his arm and kunai, the sound of Kakashi and his opponent clashing echoing in the clearing behind him. Hearing Kakashi grunt in exertion, Naruto turned around and saw him pressing kunai to kunai with his opponent, the two trying to overpower each other. The two saw a blur moving in from the corner of their visions and, neither letting up on the pressure, they both turned their heads to see a half-dozen shuriken coming in on the root Anbu. The instant Kakashi felt his opponent let up on the pressure, he dropped his kunai and grabbed the Anbu by the wrists. Using his Sharingan to predict the Anbu's movements, he held his ground for the second it took the shuriken to hit their target. With the root Anbu disabled by his injuries, Kakashi released his wrists, disarmed him of his kunai, and plunged it into the Anbu's heart in a single smooth motion. Panting, Kakashi quickly pulled his headband back over his Sharingan and sat down. The three root operatives sent to kill him and both his former students were dead, so he felt pretty safe for the moment despite the nagging voice in the back of his head that he was forgetting something important. Looking over to his bloody former student, he recognized the look on his face. "What's wrong, Naruto? I know that wasn't exactly your first kill." Naruto looked up at Kakashi, trying to find the words to express his emotions at the moment. It wasn't the same as the other times. The aim Junin and that tyrant in Snow Country, when I hit them with the Rasengan they flew away and died out of sight, without any mess like this. This time, he was laying there, his blood on me, struggling to live. I saw him get weaker and weaker, until he just stopped. Kakashi bowed his head at that. Yeah, there's always a difference between knowing you killed someone, and actually seeing the life leave him. But remember, if you didn't kill him, he would have killed that body, helped his partner kill me, and then he would have regrouped and gone after you and Sakura. Which do you prefer, getting bloody and knowing Sakura's safer for it, or staying clean and always worrying for her safety? Naruto sat next to Kakashi, facing the opposite way to watch for trouble while they recuperated from the fight. They could wait to continue tracking down to Yuya until they were in better condition. Besides, they'd have a hard time finding her without Kakashi's summons and he needed to recover enough chakra to summon them and still be able to put up a decent fight if they ran into more trouble. Unseen by the two in the clearing, the last root Anbu of the four-man squad left the area to report to Danzo about this strange man with unusual powers that was helping the little group they were sent to exterminate. He felt no guilt for sending his squad to its death to test out the unknown male, because like they say, in the shinobi world, information can mean more than many lives. Naruto and Jiraiya. Naruto was telling Jiraiya all the details of what had happened before, during, and after the fight while Jiraiya was writing it in a report he'd send by summon to Tsunade so she knew what was going on behind her back. Author's endnote. What will Kakashi and Kimimaro find when they get to the place where Yuya is at? What will Danzo do with the new information he receives from the surviving root that encountered Kakashi and Kimimaro? What will Tsunade do with the information Jiraiya is sending her, or will it even get there? What will Jiraiya do for Naruto and Sakura's training next, especially now that they have to actively watch for trouble from Root now? To find out, you'll have to wait for the next chapter to come out. So please review my work and let me know what you think. Also, that was my very first fight scene, so any reviews or constructive criticism regarding it would be especially appreciated. Constructive criticism appreciated, compliments welcome, and flames will be either laughed at or ignored. As far as suggestions from my reviewers go, Pain is in Akatsuki, so Naruto has a relative in the Akatsuki, but a distant relative at that. While I can't say Naruto won't help Konoha, I can say that it won't be out of the goodness of his heart. Inner Sakura talking with Kyuubi would be fairly humorous to read Imho, but I can't think of a way to make it plausible in this story without contorting this story for that single scene, so I'll reserve the suggestion for an omake or another fic. For the body suggestions, Zabuza is out, you'll see why later, and Raiga isn't likely. I actually have 10/11 bodies picked out and am considering more, and Haku is one. Jiraiya definitely will train Naruto more than he did in canon. In regards to the other abilities the Rinnegan is supposed to have that I didn't have Kyuubi mention, yes, Naruto will gain those abilities. Right now he has the middle ring, compared to Pain's eyes, which gives him the abilities regarding the secondary bodies. When he gains the outer ring on his original body's eyes, he'll have the ability to manipulate all chakra elements with his original body. When he gains the inner ring on his original body's eyes, he'll gain the ability to master techniques in very little, almost no time. Also, he'll gain a fourth ring, a ring of blue inside his pupil. When he gains it, he'll have access to the improvements Kyuubi made for his bloodline. All these rings, however, are gained by hard work. In order to gain the regular 3 rings, Naruto will have to master 6 different bodies type of jutsu and 6 different bodies elemental chakra control. When Naruto masters a certain body's jutsu type, that body will have the inner ring appear in its eyes. When he masters a certain body's elemental chakra control, that body will have the outer ring appear in its eyes. As such, all of Naruto's bodies may have different rings in their eyes, the middle ring they start out with being the only common factor. The fourth ring will only appear in Naruto's original body's eyes, but I'll keep what it does and what it requires to activate it a secret for now. Naruto sat next to Kakashi, facing the opposite way to watch for trouble while they recuperated from the fight. They could wait to continue tracking down to Yuya until they were in better condition. Besides, they'd have a hard time finding her without Kakashi's summons, and he needed to recover enough chakra to summon them and still be able to put up a decent fight if they ran into more trouble. Unseen by the two in the clearing, the last root Anbu of the 4-man squad left the area to report to Danzo about this strange man with unusual powers that was helping the little group they were sent to exterminate. He felt no guilt for sending his squad to its death to test out the unknown male, because like they say, in the shinobi world, information can mean more than many lives. Naruto and Jiraiya. Naruto was telling Jiraiya all the details of what had happened before, during, and after the fight while Jiraiya was writing it in a report he'd send by summon to Tsunade so she knew what was going on behind her back. Chapter 3. 2 days prior. Yuya didn't know whether to bless her stars or curse the heavens, though given her preference for the latter she'd probably be doing it either way. She'd survived the Wind Mistress's attack in the aftermath, but one of the logs had pinned and crushed her legs. In such dire straits, she knew using chakra would do her no good. Even if she summoned, her minions would be no help as she couldn't control them without her flute. They'd just stand there and stare at her as she cursed at them for being so useless. Anything that came close enough for her to grab, she would grab it, kill it, and eat it raw. She'd always said she'd never eat bugs like they taught you to in survival courses, but she wasn't above that anymore. She was about to let another string of curses out to the heavens when a pair of shadows fell over her, and she looked behind her to see them. Present time. And how's our little redhead doing today? The 30-something lady of the house Yuya was staying in asked. Fine, Mrs. Alart. It took a concentrated effort on Yuya's part to not swear up a storm these past 2 days, but this couple had taken her in and nursed her somewhat back to health, though there was little they could do for her legs. No use getting your hopes up for walking, girl. Orochimaru Tem will recover from his body switch within the next week, and then he'll realize he can still sense your seal. Then he sends his special forces out and it's bye-bye to Yuya. Me and my husband are going out to get some things from a nearby town, but our son will be staying here to take care of you until we get back. You'll be okay with that, right, Yuya-chan? Yuya mentally grit her teeth, both at being called Chan and at the thought of spending a full day or two alone with the 10-year-old who kept trying, poorly, to hit on her, but forced a sunny smile and said, "Yep, no problems here." As she heard the door shut as they left, Yuya mentally braced herself for the tribulation she knew was quick in coming. Sure enough, not 10 seconds later she heard it. "Hey, baby, believe in love at first sight. If not, I can always walk by a second time. I wonder how I can strangle him and make it look like an accidental death without the use of my legs." with Kakashi and Kimimaro. As Tayuya was contemplating the murder and possible castration of the young man, Kakashi was gathering his chakra for another summoning. Fortunately for the two of them, they had found out that Kimimaro kept a small number of soldier pills on his person at all times, and apparently they had stuck with his body all this time. Using these had sped up the replenishing of both Kakashi's and Naruto's chakra pools, and now they were ready to begin the search for the redhead's location again. With a poof of smoke, Pakun and the rest of the dog summons appeared again, ready to pick up where they left off. Pakun hopped up onto Kakashi's shoulder, and the three set off after the nin dog summons. Less than 100 feet from their starting point, however, the dogs had dived into the bushes, Kakashi grabbing Naruto and following right after. Above their heads in the trees, a man and a woman in black cloaks with blue clouds stopped. Why are we going to the checkpoint to meet up with Sasori-sama, anyway? We haven't gotten the information to give to him yet. The man sounded almost whiny as he questioned his companion. To let him know that she'll be ready for interrogation soon. Sasori-sama wants that information on Orochimaru's forces and plans badly, so he'll be coming to extract the information from her himself. Our job is to make certain she's healthy enough to last long enough under his methods to give him some useful information, and to tell him when she'll be ready for the interrogation. Now hurry it up, or do you want me to explain that you're the reason he was kept waiting? With those words the two were off and running once more, leaving Kakashi and Naruto to their thoughts. Sasori, wasn't he a part of that group Jiraiya-sama warned me was after Naruto, and those cloaks, those two were definitely agents of the Akatsuki. Naruto, Kakashi whispered, drawing Naruto's attention to him. We have to get going. Those two work for the same organization as Itachi and Kisame. Naruto's eyes went wide. We can't let them know of your current whereabouts. I'm afraid we'll have to drop the search for this girl, Kami save her soul. After a moment of thought, Naruto shook his head. No, Kakashi-sensei, first off, how will they recognize me? This isn't my original body and looks nothing like me. Second, anything that helps our enemy, hurts us. We can't let those people get whatever information it is they want from this girl. I say we go in there, tell her what's going on if she doesn't already know, and offer to rescue her. If she accepts, we grab her and hightail it out of here before those two get back. If she refuses, well, we can at least make her death quick and painless, rather than let them torture her to death. Either way we save her from torture, they don't get the information, and Sasori will probably be pissed at those two for failing to deliver what they told him they had when he arrives later on expecting it. Kakashi sighed. He didn't like it, but he had to agree with Naruto's logic. Alright, but I want you to inform Jiraiya of this little kink in our plans. We'd better hurry. I want as much distance between us and those two as possible. With Jiraiya and Naruto. And that's how Kage Bunshin no Jutsu will help with mastering your bloodline's traits. Hey Ero Sennin, there's something Kakashi-sensei wants me to tell you. Naruto interrupts Jiraiya. Konoha, Secret Root Forces Base. The Root Anbu lay dead, his report on Danzo's table as he pondered what to do about this unknown figure throwing a kunai into the gears of his plans. To recruit, to kill, or to extort into doing my work. No matter which I choose, I need more information on this unexpected variable tossed into my plans. Clearing his throat, Danzo said, prepare a squad for a long-term, unsupported, high-priority information gathering mission. They have 48 hours before they'll be briefed, maximum. And get someone to dispose of the remains of this failure. With a silent nod of his head, the Root Anbu in the corner disappeared from the room to complete his master's orders. Between Jiraiya's location and Konoha, Gamakachi was booking it, trying to get to Konoha as fast as possible, the scroll Jiraiya had given to him tucked into his mouth and wrapped in his tongue. He had been given special instructions to stay out of sight of any and all Konoha shinobi above genin rank with the exception of the Hokage herself and Shizune, until he had delivered the scroll to her. Small village on the fire, rice border. As the two of them approached the village, Kakashi began to wonder about the location. This village was abandoned over 10 years ago. With no ground traffic, they probably littered the ground with traps, so it'll be best to stick to the roofs. Naruto, guys, we're taking to the roofs in the village, and everyone be on the lookout for traps. I don't want any leftover guards knowing we're here until it's too late for them to stop us. Naruto nodded, and most of the nin dogs made an affirmative sound or gesture. We're close now, Kakashi. 100 feet forward and 20 feet to the right, second story room. That's where she's at. Pakun spoke up. Alright, Naruto, I'll go in. If I need a hand, I'll flare my chakra and Pakun here will tell you about it. You'll be the element of surprise if it comes down to that, okay? Naruto nodded, though with a frown this time. Inside the house. For the last time, you're just not my type, okay, kid. Kakashi looked up at the ceiling, wondering what the heck was going on upstairs to produce that statement. A young voice answered her statement, come on to Yuya-chan, you just know we'd be perfect together. Kakashi swore at the bottom of the stairs that he could hear this, to Yuya's, teeth grinding together. I really hope they aren't both guards. I don't think 100 of me and Naruto would be enough to deal with a woman pissed off at the guy who can't take a hint. Standing outside the room the grinding noise was coming from, Kakashi raised his headband from over his left eye to prepare for the fight he expected on the other side of the door. Bracing himself for any counterattacks, Kakashi kicked the door down and looked inside. He immediately released the genjutsu inside the room that his Sharingan perceived with a handseal and a flare of chakra, unknowingly breaking it for Yuya, too. The image around the kid hitting on Yuya wavered before falling to reveal the stout man underneath it. At 4 feet 5 inches, it was obvious to Kakashi the man had no care for his personal appearance as all his hair, on his face and head, was wild and unkempt. His teeth were yellowed just a bit, though all of them were there and perfectly straight. His nose was bulbous, his eyes were large, with the iris a dark brown bordering on black, and his hair was an olive green color. Kakashi was just thankful for his own eyes that the man had better fashion sense than Naruto or Guy, wearing a tanned leather jacket and pants with a fishnet shirt and snakeskin boots with pointed toes. If someone as ugly as this guy was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit or any color of spandex, I think I'd gouge out my Sharingan for forever copying the image to my memory. Seeing the other person in the room was a red-headed girl that was stuck in a bed, Kakashi guessed she was the one they were there to extract. The shocked look on her face when the genjutsu dropped seemed to support that theory, in his eyes at least. Kakashi also noticed something that, would the act not have obstructed his view of his opponent, would have made him slap his forehead and bow his head. Out the window behind Yuya's head, and thus out of her view, sat Naruto and Pakun, looking in to see what was happening. Of course they're there. I flared my chakra to break the genjutsu. At least they didn't come charging in without checking the situation first. Kakashi looked back at his opponent, hoping to keep his eyes off the window. What's a 40-something-year-old man doing hitting on a girl who's 16 at the very oldest? And using a genjutsu to cover such an ugly face to deceive the lady too. Tisk, tisk. Even as the man grew red and glowered at Kakashi, Kakashi felt himself grow a little angry as the truth in his taunt hit him. I might believe in the philosophy, if they're old enough to kill, but more than a decade's difference is cradle robbing no matter how you look at it. He's an ugly pedophile. Kakashi glared at the man, and spoke in an angry voice, what's the name of the ugly, old pedophile I'll get the distinct pleasure of killing today? Kane Yamamoto, 1. The stout man performed a single hand sign before saying, Keibutsu Katacha no Jutsu, Katacha Sho 2. There was a flash of light around Kane, and a boom like thunder when a large cloud of chakra smoke hid him from view. Kakashi barely dodged to the side as a huge, arm thing tore past him and destroyed the walls around the doorway and opposite the door. The arm slid back into the cloud of chakra smoke, similar to the way Shukaku's arm slid back inside the sand egg during the third part of the Chunin exams, and Kakashi stood ready to dodge again as he kept his eyes on the cloud of chakra smoke. When the smoke dissipated, Kakashi wished it would come back, as the form before him truly was monstrous. The 4 feet 5 inches man had become a 7 feet 11 inches, something. Its legs reminded Kakashi of an elephant, short but stout and round, and its arms were just like a gorilla's, if the gorilla was 8 feet tall and had 3 malformed claws on each hand instead of fingers. Its torso was wider than 2.5 times Kakashi's shoulder-to-shoulder width and was very well muscled, even having a 16-pack. The top of its large skull was flat, with the back broad and the front coming almost to a point, like a triangle pointing to what it was facing. Underneath the top of its skull, Kakashi couldn't tell if it had a face or not, since from the bottom of the front of the skull down and around to the back of the head was covered in hundreds of thin tendrils. The closest thing it had to a face was the two large holes, which Kakashi guessed to be nostrils, on top of its head. Kakashi was thankful to see a loincloth, as the thing was bad enough as it was. Its skin was hairless and oily looking, colored gray with spots of various sizes and shades of brown and green, while its bulging muscles seemed to crawl underneath the skin. Tayuya had gone pale. What the is this? First the kid in room turns out to be a genjutsu, now the fugly old man who was hitting on me turns into this thing. I think I'll pass out if something else freaky happens. Naruto had eyes the size of dinner plates and his jaw was hanging open from his spot on the windowsill. Single quote. Single quote. With Jiraiya and Naruto. Naruto fell from the limb he had resumed his squats on, the blow of the ground to his head not breaking him out of his disgusted trance as his mind attempted to process what his other set of eyes were telling him. Jiraiya wondered yet again what his student was reacting to. With Kakashi. As he dodged the powerful extended strikes from the thing that called itself Yamamoto, Kakashi remembered what he knew of the Kane clan and their Kekkei Genkai from the last great shinobi war. The Kane clan was native to Tsuchi no Kuni, and hence Iwagakure no Sato. Minato sensei supposedly wiped out their entire clan during the war, but I guess this one got away. Their Kekkei Genkai, Keibutsu Katacha, allowed them to assume a number of monstrous and inhumanly powerful forms. That he called this, Form 1, either he hasn't achieved any other forms or he decided this was the best form for the situation. A sudden creaking of the ceiling and floor alerted Kakashi to return more awareness to his surroundings. Shimata. The roof's going to cave and the floor's going to drop out. He's taken out most of the wall supports on this floor trying to hit me. Pakun. Run interference. Kakashi shouted. Outside the window, Pakun and the other nin dogs heard Kakashi's call, and Pakun said, "Oi, Naruto. Break the top windowpane for us." Thinking by as Pakun meant the two of them, Naruto busted in the glass of the top windowpane, then prepared to leap in, until Pakun used his face as a springboard to propel himself into the room. The rest of the nin dogs leapt from the roof across the street onto Naruto's face or chest to springboard through the broken pane, although the largest one widened the hole quite a bit, causing the room to creak more as it got closer to collapsing. Fortunately for Naruto, he had been holding himself to the windowsill with chakra, so despite the fact that the dog's use of his body as a springboard had him standing perpendicular to the wall, he didn't fall on the exploding tag traps liberally littering the ground around the house. Naruto practically fell in surprise, however, when his sensei came rocketing out of the hole where the window was, with Tayuya in his arms, one hand holding her face to his chest and the other arm doing its best to support her spine. As he passed over him, Kakashi shouted to Naruto, "Block for me." Standing upright and looking in the hole in the wall, Naruto saw what he was expected to block. The tendrils covering most of the thing's skull were shooting out and lancing the nin dogs, while sparking with electricity. Seemingly in slow motion, as the last of the nin dogs poofed away to the summon plane, Naruto saw the tendrils point in their direction, at Kakashi and Tayuya behind him. Jumping back and twisting to face Kakashi, Naruto moved his arms, legs, and tail into a position as widely spread as possible, then tried to shove chakra into and out of the bones in his 5 limbs to form a dish to protect the two from the onslaught. Before the tendrils reached Naruto, the dish had become wide enough to block all the attacks. Unfortunately for Naruto's absolute defense, he had failed to consider a major detail in his plan. His body he was using used almost purely earth-based chakra and moves, including the bone manipulation it did, whereas the attack coming in was clearly using lightning chakra or something fairly similar. What Naruto failed to realize, probably because no one ever told him the fact, and Kakashi overlooked, was that lightning trumps earth. Every time. Naruto-kun. Brace yourself for a lot of pain. He heard and barely registered Kyuubi's voice before it hit. Kakashi watched as the second body of his student was skewered by seemingly hundreds of spear-like tendrils, and then electrocuted through them. He watched the muscles convulse and smelt burnt flesh while the electricity arced so intensely it was making blinding flashes. Then he watched as the body fell, thankfully not landing on any tripwires to trigger the explosive traps below. With Jiraiya and Sakura looked on, one in pained understanding and the other in near panicked worry, as Naruto convulsed in a silent scream on the ground. Sakura looked up to Jiraiya wide-eyed. Jiraiya-sensei, what's happening? Jiraiya knew his answer wouldn't be easy to hear, but expected his apprentice to be able to bear hearing it. Naruto's second body is experiencing an agonizing mortal wound or death. Sakura inhaled sharply as the rest fell into place. Nonetheless, Jiraiya continued to speak, his saddened eyes looking at Naruto's still convulsing body. This is the greatest, and yet the least considered, weakness of the Rinnegan. The bearer experiences everything the other bodies experience. It's also the reason why Kage Bunshin were designed to not return information if they were killed by either wounds or chakra exhaustion. If they did, the user of the technique would experience the pain of dying, like Naruto is. They continued to look on as Naruto's convulsing slowed to twitching, and then heavy breathing, his eyes staring emptily into space as his mind tried wrapping around what he just felt. Jiraiya shuddered at his thoughts, but what kind of agony could do this to the boy who shrugged off the pain of a Chidori through the chest to yank the arm out of himself? With Kakashi. As Kakashi watched the tendrils that skewered Naruto turn to dust, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps from the hole in the house, and he looked up to see the source of the noise. The thing, fully visible through the hole that had been expanded further by the last barrage of tendrils, was pulling back its fist, preparing to launch another extending punch. Kakashi, still midair, had no way of dodging it in time and both hands were occupied with the young girl, who was looking down at the regenerating Kimimaro, with shock, so he practically rejoiced at the next sound he heard. Crack. With one outside wall and both internal walls virtually destroyed, there simply wasn't enough support for the room, especially with the massive creature in it. The floor and roof of the room gave out at the same time, and the first floor gave out as soon as the falling beast hit it. The whole house collapsed in on itself as it fell into the deep shaft that was there in place of a basement, forcefully reminding Kakashi of why the town had been abandoned for so long. It took a good 10 seconds before Kakashi heard the resounding crash as the falling house hit the bottom of the shaft. It was during the war against Iwa. They decided to pull a terrorist attack by digging those shafts under the houses in this town with their jutsu, just narrow enough so the house wouldn't collapse without a little push. Fortunately, Sensei ended the war with them before the last stage of the plan was fulfilled, and as a token of their desire to end the hostilities, the Tsuchikage told us about this plan before the houses collapsed on their own. Seeing the weak movements of Naruto's second body below him, Kakashi carefully jumped down next to him, avoiding landing on the tripwires. Panting heavily, Naruto looked at his sensei. I don't have much chakra to spare in this body. I used pretty much all I had to repair the damage that attack did. Kakashi looked at Naruto, then at the passed out Yuya, then at Naruto again. Dispel that body. It'll only slow me down from returning to you guys with her, and we can't afford to set off any tripwires here as we rush out of town just because you're too weak to roof jump. If one explosion goes off, it'll trigger the rest, and then all of us will die as the entire village collapses into those shafts. Naruto nodded once, then dispelled the body. In a hurry to get out, Kakashi slid his headband over his Sharingan and formed a single-handed handseal to shunshin closer to the place Jiraiya and the others were waiting for him. Seconds later, a winged beast flew from the pit where the collapsed house lay. With Jiraiya, Naruto had been sitting up, gazing forward blankly while blinking every so often for the past several minutes. Sakura was torn between comfort that he wasn't in any pain at the moment, and concern that he was completely unresponsive to her and Jiraiya during this time. Although Jiraiya did try to offer her comfort. Give him some time. He's trying to cope with the mental strain of the agony he just endured. He'll come around in a little while. And come around he did, though it took a while. His eyes shifted to their normal selves, ringless, and he spoke up. Kakashi is on his way with one of the Sound Five who survived. My other body exhausted its chakra supply repairing itself, so I had to send it back into wherever it goes when not in use to recover its chakra. Jiraiya nodded his head, expecting what he was hearing, but Sakura was practically freaking out. This was the first she'd heard of the surviving Sound 5 member. The same Sound 5 that helped Sasuke get to Orochimaru and, by extension, were responsible in part for Naruto's banishment. The same Sound 5 that put Neji, Kiba, and Choji in the hospital. Fortunately, Naruto and Jiraiya noticed her near meltdown state, and decided to inform her of the facts that had led them to the decision they had come to regarding the girl. Having successfully stopped a Class 4 panic attack, Naruto looked at Jiraiya, his eyes starting to mist, and asked the question, "Why didn't you warn me about the danger of dying like that? I honestly didn't expect you to experience it so soon. I was planning on telling you later about that danger." Jiraiya sighed before he continued, the rest in his mind. "Least of all did I expect you to experience something that would make you scream in agony." The group sat in silence for a while, awaiting Kakashi's return to the group with his unconscious passenger. Near Konoha, Gamakachi was dodging left and right while heading towards the main gate of Konoha, Root Anbu in hot pursuit and throwing kunai to try and dispel the summon. As it neared its goal, it was cut off by a Root who swooped it up. Rather than risk the scroll being plucked from his mouth, Gamakachi dispelled himself. With Jiraiya, Kakashi, with a still unconscious Tayuya in his arms, finally made it to the group with Jiraiya. "Set her on the ground so I can check her injuries over," Jiraiya told Kakashi, using his serious voice. As Kakashi laid Tayuya gently flat on the ground, Naruto piped up a question. "Oi, Aro Sennin, I didn't know you were a medic nin. I'm not, but you don't participate in a couple major and minor shinobi wars without picking up some basic medical knowledge. I have enough experience with injuries that I should be able to determine just how bad hers are." Jiraiya ran his hands gently over Tayuya's legs and hips, checking carefully for broken bones. As he finished checking how badly her legs were messed up, Tayuya started to stir. "Rise and shine, kid." At the sound of an unfamiliar man's voice, Tayuya's eyes shot open. Looking up at the white-haired man, she saw the kanji for oil on his headband and sagged. Looking around her, she saw Hatake Kakashi, the orange-wearing Gaki from her last mission, and a pink-haired Kunoichi wearing the leaf headband. "So, this is how it goes down. Taken by tree huggers to be tortured for information on the bastard who'll kill me as soon as he realizes I'm still alive." Tayuya looked almost broken as she said this, not even putting up a token resistance. Naruto, not being one to let people who weren't his enemy suffer if he could help it, decided to break her funk. "Oi, what are you talking about? We aren't going to interrogate you. And how's he going to find out you're alive if he doesn't already know? Those Akatsuki agents we saved you from sure weren't going to tell him, and no one here is exactly on friendly speaking terms with him, either." "Akatsuki agents? What the hell are you talking about, nut?" Kakashi decided to jump into the conversation before Naruto could jump into an insult contest with the redhead. "The people keeping you in that house were agents of an organization called the Akatsuki, specifically under Akasuna no Sasori. Sasori has an especial hatred for Orochimaru, so he was going to come and personally torture information out of you about him once his agents got you healthy enough to survive the torture long enough to give him some useful information." Tayuya paled at this. Oh, she gulped. "Well, in about a week, the bastard will have regained enough strength from switching bodies to be able to sense those of us he marked from a distance. So he'll realize I'm still alive and send a team to dispose of me for being weak. Although given that Kimimaro saw me not that long ago, he'll probably know sooner if he doesn't already." Naruto scratched the back of his neck and smiled nervously. Actually, that wasn't Kimimaro." Tayuya rolled her eyes. "Sure, nut, then who was it, you?" "Actually, yeah, Tayuya-san." Tayuya gave him a weird look, so rather than giving a long-winded explanation, Naruto just pushed chakra to his eyes and muttered, "The first path of sacrifice." Tayuya gaped at the figure the smoke revealed to her. "What the hell? It's part of my Kekkei Genkei. We'll explain later cuz it takes a long time to say it all and I think we're running a little tight for time anyway." Naruto looked at Kakashi as he said the last part, and both Kakashi and Jiraiya nodded in acknowledgement of what Naruto was saying. Jiraiya cleared his throat to get her attention as Kimimaro poofed back out to finish refilling his chakra pools, then he spoke. Since we're short on time, I won't skirt around on saying it like it is. You have two choices now, come with Naruto or die here. Tayuya didn't know how to react to that, but she just blinked before she said, either way I'll die. Orochimaru will come for me, and… No. I can seal off your curse seal so he can't sense it unless you're within 10 feet of him, and at that close he'd sense you anyway. Tayuya looked thoughtful, considering a continued life. I'd still be a cripple. Kakashi sighed, then pulled out a kunai. Well, if you want to die we can at least make it quick and relatively painless. Kit, don't let him kill her yet, I have an idea that may help. But she has to accept the risks first. Naruto quickly shoved his way between Kakashi and Tayuya, preventing Kakashi from killing Tayuya, who had tilted her head back and closed her eyes in acceptance. Everyone looked at Naruto slightly surprised, although Tayuya's look was more like, what the hell do you think you're doing? Kyuubi says she's got an idea. While I meditate to talk with her about it, why doesn't Ero Sennin go ahead and take care of Tayuya's curse seal? Fine, Gaki. Jiraiya made a shooing motion to Naruto and Kakashi, you two go a ways away for right now, in case the young lady's curse seal is in an embarrassing place. How do we know you're not going to do something perverted to her if it is, Ero Sennin? Naruto poked at Jiraiya's back. Why do you think I'm having Sakura stay right here, Gaki? At this Naruto calmed a bit, and went to join Kakashi a ways down the road. Although Tayuya had caught on to what was being implied, and was now looking at the white-haired Sannin with a good deal of caution. She looked at the pink-haired Kunoichi, and said, if he does something perverted to me, promise you'll help restrain him while I perform the castration. Sakura nodded as Jiraiya's sweat dropped, while in his mind he trembled and covered his most prized possession. Jiraiya sat next to where Tayuya laid and directed Sakura to sit opposite him. Sakura, pay close attention to what I do, because you are my apprentice, and I expect you to be able to do this as well someday. Sakura nodded and Jiraiya continued, so, Tayuya-san, where is that curse seal at? Naruto's mindscape. So, what's this idea to help Tayuya out, and what are the risks she'll have to accept? Naruto said, the plan is simple. I'll do something similar to her that I unintentionally did with Kimamaro's body. With your permission, I can pump my Yukai out of you and into her curse seal. This will instantly break her curse seal's connection with Orochimaru, just like it did with Kimamaro's, and by manipulating the Yukai I put in the curse seal, I can repair virtually any damage in her body, including everything in her legs. However, Kyuubi paused as though considering how to put the next part. Well, what's the bad news? It all sounds good so far. After this is done, her curse seal will fuse into her. Most likely, this will give her the same advantages as Kimamaro's old body now has. The bonuses of Curse Seal Level 2 are permanently hers without the stamina drain or breakdown of her mind and soul, but she'll also be permanently stuck in that form. I may be able to lessen it so she only partially transforms, but she'll have some features, in part or whole, from her Level 2 form. Also, when we do this, the backlash of the broken bonds will let Orochimaru know she is still alive even in his current weakened state, but he won't know where she is or even if she survived after the bonds were snapped. Kyuubi looked at Naruto meaningfully as she continued, and one last thing. Naruto nodded, feeling the seriousness of the situation. This whole thing will require preparation. You'll have to draw an intricate seal I'll show you and it'll need to be set up a particular way. She has to be in the seal the whole time you draw it, and you'll have to perform a long chain of hand seals to perform the technique. Any little error in this could have unpredictable side effects, so you'll have to get it right the first time. Naruto didn't know what to say to that, so he just decided, I'll just tell Tayuya-chan everything and let her decide whether or not to go through with it. With Jiraiya. Fuya Huan, 3. Jiraiya shouted, his hand pressing down on Tayuya's curse seal, between her shoulder blades near the base of her neck. The seals, kanji, and runes Jiraiya drew seemed to crawl over Tayuya, forming a seal that looked like a barbed wire fence circling the curse seal. Tayuya lay panting as she glared up at Jiraiya. You didn't tell me that was going to hurt like hell. Jiraiya seemed to ignore the outburst. Just remember, as long as you never try and call on the curse seal yourself, the suppressor seal will hold. Yeah, I got it, you crusty old man. Naruto sure does pick up the charmers, Jiraiya sarcastically thought. Yo. The three looked up to see Kakashi, nose buried in his book. Naruto's done talking with the Kyuubi, so he sent me to see if it's all clear for him to come back over here. Oi, Gaki, you can come back on over. Jiraiya shouted in Naruto's direction. A few seconds later, Naruto was jogging towards them, hands behind his head. So, Nut, what did the Kyuubi have to say about this? Well, here's the deal. At the abandoned village, two figures stood looking down a pit, both wearing black cloaks with blue clouds on them. Well, we're screwed. When Sasori-sama gets here and finds out we lost his information. The man whined out. No, Kane-san isn't in the pit. Nor have I sensed his death. Which means he's tracking whoever either interfered here or took our information. We'll have to follow his tracks and eventually we'll catch up to him and, thus, our information. Besides, we have a whole month before Sasori-sama expects his information to be delivered to him, the woman calmly replied. Near Kakashi and Jiraiya of the Sannin and Sharingan Kakashi. I'll have to wait for an opening to retrieve Sasori-sama's future puppet. I doubt I'd be able to pull off this with both of them here. But I won't stop looking for that opening, 'cause no one makes a fool of Kane Yamamoto, the metamorph thought as he watched the group of shinobi and his target from a hidden spot in the trees through a spyglass. With Jiraiya. So, to Yuya-chan, that's how it's gotta be. You don't have to decide right now, you could come with us and think about it before deciding. Naruto said. I think I will, Nut. While their conversation was going on, another conversation between Jiraiya and Kakashi was taking place. Jiraiya-sama, does it matter how badly decomposed the body is? For the Rinnegan, you mean? Kakashi nodded. As long as you have either eye sockets or eyeballs for the Rinnegan to match a gaze with, the rest of the body's condition is inconsequential. In that case, if you are going on that body collecting trip to help Naruto, I've got a suggestion for some useful ones in Nami no Kuni. Oh, do tell. Meanwhile, back with Naruto and the two Kunoichi. Hey, Naruto-kun. Yeah, Sakura-chan. Jiraiya mentioned that Kakashi was returning to Konoha soon and that it would be our last guaranteed chance to get letters to people in Konoha. We should write them something while we have the chance. Ah. Naruto slumped down and pulled writing materials out of his pack. His tongue rubbing his upper lip in concentration, Naruto began his letter. Dear Ba-chan. Half an hour later, Kakashi stood before Jiraiya, Naruto, Sakura, and Yuya, the message scroll from Jiraiya and the letters from Sakura and Naruto tucked safely in his pouch, the spot he usually reserved for his Ika Ika Paradise book. Well, best of luck, all. Wish me a safe trip home. Naruto smiled sadly, knowing this might be the last time he got to see his Junin-sensei for a long while, as long as you promise not to get lost on the road of life on the way there. Sakura had a teary-eyed smile and just nodded her head, not trusting her voice. Not even gone yet and I miss him already. Kakashi gave an eye smile, then vanished in a blur of motion. Not too far away, Kane Yamamoto watched Kakashi leave the area, feeling tempted to take out the copy nin. Can't get distracted from the mission, damn it. Next time, copycat. I'll get you next time. He continued to watch the group, waiting for them to leave a wider opening. After all, Kakashi was a small-time hindrance compared to one of the Sannin. With Jiraiya looks at his current traveling companions and, not wanting the two sentimental ones to get pulled too deep by their depressing thoughts, he boisterously said, well, now. We should be getting set to go. I already have the perfect destination in mind and the way to get there picked out. Naruto, you'll be carrying Yuya. Huh, why am I carrying her? Naruto, Yuya is your responsibility. Jiraiya had his serious face on again. As Sakura and I are Konoha nin, and Yuya was an Oto nin, if she were our responsibility, we would be bound by our oaths to Konoha to take her in and hand her over for interrogation. Secondly, the choice to save her was made by you. It was the same choice I would have probably made in your shoes, but as a wandering nin you have to learn to take responsibility for all of your choices. So until Yuya can take care of herself, she's yours to take care of. Great, I'm stuck with the nut taking care of me. And Naruto. Huh. Naruto gives a frustrated look to Jiraiya, knowing he won't like whatever he's going to say next. You won't be able to use your Kekkei Genkai until I say so. Jiraiya said sternly. But why? The next thing Naruto knew, Jiraiya was kneeling next to him, whispering in his ear. Naruto, there's a foreign chakra signature sitting just out of sight that's been there since Kakashi returned. They're going to try and tail us. The most effective way to throw off their attempt, as well as misdirect any tracking units of Root Anbu that might be after us, is if you use a liberal amount of Cage Bunshin with henges on so they can't tell which group is the real one. After you pick up Tayuya, make 30 Cage Bunshin and, while the smoke from their creation is still covering us, have 1/3 henge into me, 1/3 henge into Sakura, and 1/3 henge into a Tayuya carrying Naruto. Once the smoke clears, we'll all take off in different directions.